Melissa. I am 34 years old, and what happened on my son's 7th birthday made me realize that not every family gathering is built on love. Some are stitched together by power plays, resentment, and people who live to humiliate others while smiling through their teeth. This was supposed to be a beautiful day, one that would belong to my son and only him, but my aunt, who had always treated me like I was somehow beneath her, turned it into something else. She tried to make me invisible, and for a moment she succeeded. But what I did later on her birthday made sure she would never forget who I was again. The morning of Liam's birthday started like every loving parent dreams. Balloons filled our living room in shades of ocean blue and forest green. A local baker in Raleigh had crafted the most perfect dinosaur cake with layers of rich chocolate and cream cheese frosting, and the backyard was full of rented play tents, bubble machines, and party streamers waving in the wind. I had been planning this celebration for 3 months, coordinating every little detail between my work schedule and school drop-offs. I wanted my son to feel like the world celebrated him for just one day, because he was worth that and more. And from the moment he ran into the kitchen and saw his favorite Triceratops centerpiece glowing under the chandelier, I knew it was working. He beamed like the sun. That alone made the sleepless nights and endless to-do lists worth it. My Aunt Carol arrived around 10 minutes before the first guests. She was wearing a pink blouse that was trying too hard and carrying the same superiority she always brought into my home. She scanned the setup like a judgmental critic reviewing a high school play, and I knew the comments were coming. They always did, but I was too happy that morning to let her get under my skin. Or so I thought. When the cake had been sliced and everyone had finally gathered in the backyard for presents, I felt the perfect opportunity for a family photo. Not just any photo, a memory. The kind you frame for years, the kind my son would see one day and remember who stood beside him on his happiest day. I approached Aunt Carol with my phone and asked her to take a photo of me and Liam together. She took it with her usual smug grin and then looked at me and told me, as casually as if she were asking me to pass the salt, to step aside and take the picture myself. She said it would be better to have a proper family photo, without me in it. At first I thought I misunderstood, but no. She waved her hand dismissively and pulled in my mother, my cousins, and a few of the other guests, herded them into a group around my son, and stood there waiting for me to hit the shutter button. It was like watching someone erase you from your own life. The air went cold. I felt my chest tighten, and the laughter of the guests faded into a distant, hollow echo. My hands trembled, but I smiled and took the photo anyway, swallowing every ounce of rage that burned in my throat. This was for Liam, not for her. I would not ruin his day because she decided to reduce me to the status of a background prop in my own child's memory. But the humiliation did not stop there. For the next 3 hours, Carol treated me like I was the hired help. She asked me to refill drinks. She pointed out empty napkin trays. She waved me over to wipe juice off someone's chair like it was my personal duty. At one point, she even clinked her glass to quiet the guests and announced that I should bring out the party favors now, like I was on cue in a play she had written. I barely tasted a bite of food. I moved from kitchen to patio to garden like a server at an unpaid banquet. My body present, but my heart slowly darkening with every order barked at me in front of my own relatives. No one said a word. No one stopped her. Because everyone was used to her, but I was done being used. When the last guest left and Liam hugged me goodnight with icing still on his chin, I smiled. Because he was happy. Because for him, this was magic. And that was all I ever wanted. But as I stood alone in the kitchen, washing plates while Carol laughed over wine with my mother in the other room, I made a decision. I would not forget this day. Not for the humiliation, not for the exhaustion, but for the clarity. I was going to make sure Carol never disrespected me like this again, and I was going to do it with the kind of precision that she would never see coming. Her birthday was 3 weeks later. She planned it like a royal coronation, inviting family and friends to a fancy rooftop venue in downtown Charlotte. Of course, she made a big deal about it. She always did. I RSVP'd with enthusiasm, sent her a fake smiling emoji-filled text thanking her for including me, and even offered to help her coordinate something special. She said I could handle the gift presentation. Perfect. What she did not know was that I had quietly reached out to several of the guests she loved to impress. I asked them to send me short clips, birthday wishes, memories, inside jokes, things I said I would compile into a tribute video for her big day. Everyone thought it was sweet, but the final video was not what anyone expected. Instead of warm wishes, I created a visual reminder of what kind of person Carol really was. The clip began with soft music and pictures of her from past birthdays. But then came footage from Liam's party. Recordings I had captured from my security cameras that covered the backyard and living room. I edited in moments of her dismissing me, ordering me around, cutting me out of photos, smirking as I ran around serving people while she raised her wine glass. The guests were dead silent when the video played. Her smirk faded before the first minute ended. My mother looked confused. My cousins whispered. And when the clip ended with the family photo she had orchestrated without me, just my son and everyone else, while I stood on the sidelines holding the phone, the silence turned into discomfort. Then came the shift. People began pulling away from her. Conversations turned awkward. She tried to laugh it off, but there was nothing to laugh at. She looked around the room and realized she had been exposed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but clearly. Her power came from pretending, and I took the mask off. She barely touched her cake. She barely said a word to me. And I stayed through it all, smiling, sipping my champagne, letting her feel exactly what it was like to be invisible. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted justice. The kind that does not need to shout. The kind that lingers. The kind that reminds people of their place when they forget yours. And as I walked away that night, heels clicking on concrete under the Charlotte skyline, I realized something. Dignity is not about enduring. It is about responding. And when you respond with truth, they never see it coming. Update 1. A month passed after my son's birthday, and on the surface, everything returned to normal. Family group chats went quiet, photos were posted and forgotten, and no one openly mentioned what had happened that day at my house. But I did not forget. I carried it with me the way you carry a splinter under the skin, invisible to others, but impossible to ignore. I knew exactly when my aunt's birthday was coming up, because she never let anyone forget it. She treated her birthday like a national holiday, something people were supposed to plan their lives around. And from the moment she sent out the invitations, I knew I would not avoid it. I would not stay home. I would not make excuses. I was going to attend, and I was going to play it all the way through. She hosted it at her house outside Charlotte, the same house where every surface was covered in decorations that screamed self-importance. Gold balloons, spelling her name, catered food laid out like a magazine spread, expensive candles burning everywhere, even though it was a warm evening. She floated around in a fitted dress, soaking in attention, loudly reminding people how much work she had put into everything. I arrived calm, composed, dressed simply, smiling just enough. No one suspected a thing. To them, I was just the quiet niece who had hosted a nice party for her son weeks earlier. Early in the evening, before dinner was served, my aunt announced that it was time for photos. Of course she did. She positioned herself in the center of the living room, pulling people in close, adjusting shoulders, fixing hair, making sure she was the focal point. I watched her the same way she had watched me at my son's party, with that casual authority that assumes obedience. Someone handed me a phone and asked if I could take the picture. I stepped forward, framed the shot, and waited for her to smile. Then, with the same effortless motion she had used on me weeks earlier, I guided her gently but firmly out of the frame, shifting my body just enough so the group closed in behind her without noticing. The shutter clicked. The photo was taken, and she was not in it. No one reacted. No one questioned it. People laughed, checked the picture, moved on. My aunt stood frozen for a second, confusion flashing across her face as she realized what had just happened. She looked at the phone, then at the group, then at me. I gave her the same polite smile I had given her at my house, the one that says everything and nothing at the same time. The moment passed, swallowed by chatter and music, but I saw it land. She had felt it. That sudden drop in the stomach, that quiet humiliation, that realization that something had shifted. Dinner followed, and that was when I started to work. Slowly. Methodically. I asked her for things the way she had asked me. Could she bring me a drink? Could she grab extra napkins? Could she check on the food in the kitchen? Each request was delivered politely, sweetly, always in front of others, always with the assumption that she would comply. At first she laughed it off, trying to maintain her hostess image. Then she started to tense. I could see it in the way her smile tightened, in the way she hesitated before responding. But I did not stop. I asked her to refill the chips, to bring a chair closer, to adjust the music, to help me carry a plate. Every time she sat down, I found another small thing she needed to do. The balance of the evening shifted in a way that was almost physical. Other relatives noticed, not consciously at first, but enough to lean back and watch. The woman who loved control was losing it inch by inch. She was no longer the center. She was moving, serving, responding. And the more she did, the more furious she became. Her face flushed. Her movements grew sharp. The house that had been filled with her energy now felt tense, like a wire pulled too tight. Eventually, she exploded. It was sudden and loud, the kind of outburst that makes forks stop midair and conversations die instantly. She turned on me, her voice cutting through the room, and in front of everyone she ordered me out of her house. She accused me of disrespect, of ruining her night, of embarrassing her in her own home. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I simply picked up my bag, looked around the table, and walked toward the door with my head high. That was the moment she did not expect. As soon as I stepped outside, chairs scraped back. One by one, relatives stood up. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly, decisively. People began collecting their coats, murmuring that it was getting late, that they had early mornings, that the mood had shifted. Within minutes, the room emptied. The food remained untouched. The candles kept burning. The balloons sagged slightly in the warm air. And my aunt stood there stunned, watching her birthday dissolve in real time. I paused on the porch just long enough to look back through the window. She was alone at the table she had arranged so carefully, surrounded by decorations meant to celebrate her, staring at the empty chairs like she could not understand how it had happened. That look on her face was not anger anymore. It was shock. Pure, silent shock. Update 2. The night my aunt's birthday party collapsed in on itself like a dying star was not the end. It was the beginning of something much more satisfying. For the first time in years, I saw the cracks in her armor. The perfectly rehearsed charm, the controlling tone, the fake smiles. None of it held up when people stopped pretending they liked her. She stood alone in her gold balloon palace, and I walked away with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had finally tipped the scale. But I was not finished. A week later, I decided to gather the family, not for revenge, not for spectacle, but to remind everyone what celebration was supposed to feel like. No tension, no performance, just laughter and good food and the kind of energy that leaves people lighter than when they arrived. I made a reservation at a beautiful little restaurant in downtown Asheville, one with ivy crawling along its brick walls and soft jazz echoing through the stone courtyard. I told everyone who had walked out with me that night that I wanted to host a dinner, my treat, just to thank them for showing me that family could still stand for something honest. Everyone said yes, without hesitation. No one asked if Carol was invited. No one mentioned her name at all. It was understood. She had crossed a line, and this dinner was on the other side of it. The night came, and we arrived in staggered waves, hugging at the entrance, shedding coats, finding our seats under the soft glow of hanging lanterns. The table stretched down the courtyard like a river of warmth, wine glasses catching candlelight, children laughing in their chairs, a birthday cake I had ordered just because it felt right to bring sweetness into the space. Everyone was relaxed, present. And then she walked in. My aunt arrived in a cloud of entitlement and designer perfume, acting as if her invitation had simply been lost in the mail. She wore the same forced smile she always used when walking into a room she wanted to dominate, except this time it had nowhere to land. She moved to the table like she belonged there, pulled out a chair in the middle, and sat down like she was the guest of honor. Conversations faltered. Forks paused midair. I felt every muscle in my body coil, but I did not shrink. I stood. Without raising my voice, without theatrics, I walked to her side and reminded her that she had not been invited, that this dinner was not for her, that her seat was not available. She laughed, a thin, nervous laugh. She stayed in her chair, arms crossed, chin high, daring me to make a scene. So I did not make a scene. I made a call. Within minutes, 2 members of the restaurant's security staff appeared beside her. I had planned for this. I had warned the manager earlier that there might be an unwanted guest, and they were ready. When they gently asked her to leave, her confidence cracked. She tried to argue, to plead, to spin a narrative that she had simply shown up out of love, that she was family. But it was too late. No one backed her up. No one asked the staff to reconsider. No one said her name. They escorted her out through the same courtyard where laughter had just danced. She looked back once, eyes scanning the table, expecting someone to speak up for her. But no one moved. I returned to my seat, lifted my glass, and the conversation picked up right where it had left off. She had never experienced that before, a moment where her presence did not hold weight, where her voice did not shape the room, where the world did not pause to accommodate her ego. And what broke her was not the fact that she had been removed by security, but that it was done so calmly, so cleanly, so unapologetically. That night, as dessert was served and the music drifted gently overhead, I felt something shift permanently. My aunt had always been the one who tried to bend the family around her will, but now she was the one on the outside looking in, She had expected me to be humiliated. She had expected me to cower, to play along, to give in for the sake of peace. But I had not. I had stood my ground. I had drawn the line, and I had done it without fear. She was shocked not just by the rejection, but by how effortlessly I had led the entire moment. That was the real wound. Not that she was told to leave, but that I had made the decision and no one challenged it. For the first time, I was the one at the center of the room, and she could not do a thing about it. Update 3. After the restaurant incident, the shift became irreversible. Something that had been simmering beneath the surface for years had finally broken clean through. My Aunt Carol, the same woman who had once orchestrated entire gatherings around herself, who used to control family events like a conductor at a symphony, had been cut off at the root. And the strangest part was how quiet the aftermath turned out to be. There was no phone call, no apology, no explosion of angry texts or voicemail tirades, no scenes. She simply disappeared. At first I thought maybe she was waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike again, for the next event where she could reinsert herself, twist the narrative, and pretend like nothing had ever happened. But that moment never came. Thanksgiving passed and she was not there. No word, no message, not even an excuse sent through someone else. Christmas rolled around and there was no arrival in a puff of perfume and pearls. No carefully wrapped gifts placed in the center of the room, no condescending remarks hidden under bows. New Year's Eve came and went and no one asked about her. It was not just me who noticed, the whole family did. But that was the real twist. No one cared. There were no hushed conversations in the corners about where she had gone, no concerned whispers about whether someone should reach out. Instead, the gatherings felt easier. There was more space at the table. Conversations flowed without tension. Laughter came quicker. Children were louder. Even my mother, who used to tiptoe around Carol's moods like she was navigating a minefield, seemed more relaxed. It was like the absence of her presence had released everyone from an invisible pressure they never realized they were under. I could see it in the small things. My cousin Samantha smiled more. My Uncle Dean stopped making awkward jokes that used to only serve to pacify her. People lingered longer at dinners. No one was walking on eggshells, and no one brought her name up unless it was to recall the chaos she had once stirred. And even then, it was spoken with a strange sense of distance, as if she was a character from a story they had outgrown. She had made herself essential for so long, constantly injecting herself into events and decisions, only to discover that her absence didn't leave a hole. It left a relief. I heard rumors, of course, that she was still in Charlotte, that she had stopped going out, that she was avoiding extended family altogether. Some said she was humiliated. Others said she felt betrayed. But what really unraveled her wasn't what I did. It was what I represented. I was the one person she had always assumed would stay beneath her heel. The one she could mock, control, diminish. The one who would never fight back. And when I did, when I stripped her of her power, not by yelling, but by standing firmly and publicly reclaiming my space, it shattered her illusion. Carol thrived off attention. She needed an audience. She needed control. And when the audience stopped clapping and the control slipped from her fingers, she did not know who she was anymore. Her silence was not a retreat. It was surrender. Not the kind that comes with apologies or realizations, but the kind that comes from knowing you lost something that cannot be rebuilt. Not with words, not with time. I never reached out to her, not once, because I did not need closure. I did not need her to admit what she had done or acknowledge the damage. That was not the point. The point was that I had stood up and reclaimed my dignity, not with cruelty, but with clarity. I had turned her own tactics around and showed her that I could outplay her without becoming her. And in doing so, I had broken the cycle, not just for me, but for the entire family. In the end, she faded from our gatherings like a bad tradition finally put to rest. There was no dramatic farewell, no speech, no confrontation, just the absence of her voice, the absence of her control, and the slow, steady healing of a family that realized they never needed her permission to be happy. And for me, that was enough, because this time the family photo was whole, and I was right in the center of it.